Doing well. I'm just catching up on all the messages I missed in the chat.
Oh yeah, my mic broke.
Oh, what are you using? Just your laptop mic now?
Nah, I'm using like a $15 Walmart mic because apparently I had my mic, my Blue Yeti, in my arm mount. Like I twisted it, and then the cable like broke.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's a cable. I mean, it's the microphone because I got new cables and they don't work. So that's $100 down the drain.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of
It
depressing.
sucks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wait now to make more videos for my channel. This is costing me money.
Oh,
Time is money.
I see.
Um, but
What if you
anyway,
just talk really close to the mic? Does it sound better then?
you tell me.
Wow, much better.
Wait, what?
I'm just kidding. It's like a little bit better just because we can hear you clearer, but not
Wait,
much.
if I get like really close like
Hold on,
this?
BRB.
There you go. You could make some coding ASMR videos, Will.
Not my cup of tea, but I feel where you're coming from. Let me see if I have everything set up still. But like you can hear me like okay, like you know the words that I'm saying, right?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you fine.
All right, all right. That's all that really matters in the
Hold,
end.
like, wait, did the mic break as soon as you joined the call?
It did. Like I was just adjusting it. I'm like, all right, let me get ready, and then it's like, oh, okay. It just fell out. Like the little hole that it goes in, it fell out. I don't understand.
Ooh, I see.
Mm.
Okay, well, I told Josh that he should come if not to stay for the Bible study, just to say hi, but he said no still. So
Yeah, he really, I guess, just doesn't enjoy him that much.
I guess so. I
Um,
guess so.
Maybe he'll come around. I don't know. You never know.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Um, so what has everybody been thinking about for this week since we said we were going to talk about faith?
So I was
Like, what's going
thinking.
on?
Sorry, I choked on my tea. Um, I was thinking of like I think there should be two major questions for talking about faith, and for me
Mm,
personally, I was always like I didn't know how faith was used or what the definition of faith was. To me, it was always kind of like faith is the same as belief.
mhm,
But then I was like, why have two words for the exact same thing? Um, so I did,
ooh,
once I did a little bit more research, and you told me about the Hebrews definition of faith. It got a little bit more interesting, I should say.
mhm.
But I'm still a little bit confused because I feel like it's still um, kind of like making it more complicated than it should be.
Mhm.
So I have two questions that I kind of want to address in this topic, which is like,
Mhm.
what is faith and why is it useful? Um,
Yeah,
and I guess I'll let you take the floor if you want to address those real quick. If you have like
yeah. I would like to address those. I will say so. I have much. I wasn't really fully prepared last week. I have much more formulated thoughts this
hmm
week. Um,
nice.
on kind of what I want to say on what we're talking about. And then hopefully we can like lead to even more questions.
Yeah.
And so first you talked about the two words, and actually it's interesting. Did you look into that at all? Why there's two words?
What do you mean?
You said faith and belief are two different words.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I didn't really. That was just kind of my initial thought. I don't think like I didn't specifically look up like the correlation between them.
Yeah,
But I just kind of after reading about faith, I was like, okay, so it's not exactly belief, but it's kind of belief. So I'm still kind of on the fence about it.
yeah. Well, I would say for our purposes, we could very much, and the way that our culture even works, we can use them interchangeably. Because actually, I actually heard this in one of the podcasts that I listened to. But if you go back to there's not really two words um, in the original Greek, at least of the Bible, right? Um,
Yeah.
and but so eventually you get to English, which is the language we speak now, And the guy talked about what's interesting actually with a lot of words. If you go, this is just a fun fact. If you go back in time to when English was forming from the Germanic languages, Angle and it was the language of the Angles at first,
Uh-huh.
which were a Germanic tribe who were up in what's today Britain and the UK. Um, English was a Germanic language, and then eventually the French came up and they conquered what was the land of the Angles, and they were in charge. And so they brought their Romance language, French, which is derived from Latin. Germanic and Latin are basically kind of the two roots of a lot of languages.
Hmm.
And we get two words from a lot of different things. And he actually said that the roots for belief and the roots for faith is a Latin word and belief is a Germanic word.
Okay.
And so they're kind. I think we can safely say that they're two words for the same thing. But you said that you were finding differences in them when you researched, so I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I guess the main difference that I saw was that, the Hebrews definition, which I believe you gave last time.
Mhm.
Um, well, I forgot exactly what it was, but I wrote it down, and it seemed like I think there was maybe because it was like from a different translation or something. I'm not sure, but it's basically saying the same thing. It's from what I found from just a quick Google search was faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the
Mhm.
evidence of things not seen.
Mhm.
Um, and to me, I don't know if that's like because to me that doesn't exactly mean belief because when I analyze the definition, it looks like it's saying so. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, so it's like um, the things that you hope for, but the second part, and the evidence of things not seen, that to me is kind of where I get a little bit confused because it almost seems like it's
Mhm.
saying that the things that you hope for, the very fact that you believe something, is the evidence to that something being true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And to me, it kind of seems a little bit contradictory,
Mhm.
or not contradictory, but it
Yeah.
could lead to a contradiction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And so about the I'll say something about the Hebrews definition.
mm,
Um, I think that kind of thinking more about it and looking back and having more time to formulate thoughts, I think that so in Hebrews, this is not telling us, it's not giving a hard definition of faith. So if someone's like, what is faith? And then you say this. I think this, especially given the, um, well, so there is a definition of faith, which I'm about to give that I kind of got through thinking and a lot from one podcast, which I can link you to actually. It was really good.
mm,
Um, But this is kind of what comes from faith is assurance of things hoped for and conviction of things not seen. When we have faith, which I will again kind of give what I found in a moment for, we get assurance of things hoped for. And this it helps to remember that the Hebrews were a people who were being persecuted, who were having a hard time holding on to their faith, to their belief, because they were having such difficult times because they were being persecuted and even killed for believing in Jesus as their savior
right,
and being Christians. And so the author is telling them, um, don't give up your faith just because it's hard. Remember what it is that we're striving for. Remember Jesus. Remember the eternity that we will have with Him when this suffering is over. And we are assured of this through our faith,
I'm
which,
back.
oh, what
and
up, Isaiah?
Hello.
Um, but basically, what I found in listening to this podcast was I found kind of two definitions, and one was for reason, and
mm,
one was for faith. Um, it's a podcast on faith and reason,
yeah,
and
yeah. Uh,
and the so mhm.
I was just gonna say I was gonna like I wanted to get into that as well, like how reason like coexists with faith.
Yeah, exactly, because the kind of the same thing that I was struggling with myself was like, well, reason would tell us a lot of things. Like it's reasonable to believe that I'm holding my phone in my hand right now because I can see it. I believe this is my phone. I know this is my hand,
Hmm.
um, and that's reasonable. But if I just told myself I was holding my phone in my hand and just believed it hard enough, that wouldn't make it actually real.
Right,
Um, and
right.
so
So
what's kind of the difference there is what I was getting at. So what is faith really if not just telling yourself something until it feels true?
Right.
um, or convincing yourself something is true, or really just believing something despite the facts pointing against it.
Hmm.
And what the guy was saying is that's not what faith is. It's not believing in something that's not true. It's not believing in
Yes.
something despite evidence, and it's not believing something without any evidence. He said that what reason is, right, is proof of something personally for ourselves that we have with our own faculties. And so I can reason, like I just said, that my phone's in my hand for those reasons, using my own eyes, my own hand, to
Right.
decide that I am holding my phone in my hand. And faith is not believing in something without evidence, like I said, but it's trust. Trust is essential in faith. Trust in another authority to prove something that you cannot with your own faculties.
Chris, can I
Okay.
interject?
Yeah, yeah.
To have faith means to be unsure.
Well, hold on. Let me finish my definition. To have faith is to trust another authority, like I said, to prove something you can't prove yourself. And like I think that it would be helpful to bring the definition of faith almost down to earth a little bit, because it's a word that we could use for a lot of things with that definition, if we can
Well,
agree on that definition, like trusting. Um, I trust a lot of things that science says. I trust that evolution is probably what happened, even though I cannot give you the hardcore scientific proof right now because I trust in the authority of the
well,
scientists
yeah. Okay. So I
who
just
talk
want
about
to,
evolution.
yeah, I just want to interject real quick. So,
Mhm.
um, this is where I kind of think that there's like a difference between, because a lot of people will say, well, don't you just have, aren't you using the same kind of faith in science or scientists
Mhm.
that, like religious people would do for their God? And to that, I would say no because I think there is a difference, and I think the difference is that when we're talking about um, when we're talking about science or scientists.
Mhm.
So if I just accept that Hawking radiation is a thing without knowing not a clue about it, um,
Mhm.
I would say that is me putting a kind of faith in Stephen Hawking as maybe a Christian would in God. But I think what the difference is that people shouldn't just have faith in scientists because that kind of is against the point of what science is to begin with, which is something that should be continuously questioned and doubted. And even though we have results that we can trust because we haven't figured out a way to prove them false, it doesn't mean that we should have this idea in our head that um, that like Stephen Hawking is the authority on this, and therefore whatever he says is what's going to be what we're going to see as true. Um, so I would say that and also we can test these things. So if I wanted to, I could be, or I could try to be like a physicist and go through all of the intense mathematical proofs that Stephen Hawking did for all of this research, and I could try to figure it out for myself. So I guess what I'm saying is the main difference would be that I could have the ability. It's possible for me to actually um, study and like go to a lab and test these things and see for myself based on the information that I have. Whereas if you say, for example, like I have faith that God exists, there's not really a test or an experiment that I could do to like uh, almost warrant a belief. This is just me personally, because it's like there's no test that I could do to get a result back. If I maybe um, you know I guess like prayer, for example, this is probably kind of a cliche example, but
Yeah.
if I prayed for something over and over and over again and every single time, 100% without fail, whatever I prayed for actually happened, then that would be a little bit different because then you're actually putting it to the test and you're getting consistent results back. Now there's also coincidences, which is kind of a different thing. I'm not going to get too much into that, but that's why it's like if I prayed for something 5 days in a row and it came true, there's still room that it could be a coincidence. So it's not that you just like as soon as you see a small pattern, it's not that it's true, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying.
So, yeah, I guess so. When you say like that you have trust in scientists, I would say it's reasonable to have trust and confidence in scientists because we're actually able to observe and test the things that they are claiming. And if we want to, we can get behind the theory of it and actually see what they went through, their processes, to conclude those, laws, um, and maybe we could see something that they didn't and actually refine the theory and change it, and then we would have you know, almost a reason not to trust them, but it's still that like, it's mostly just that you can, it's demonstrable what their claims are. So if they say that, because of this equation of gravity, if you drop this object off of this building from this height, it'll hit the ground with this, this unit of force. So, and I wouldn't really have faith in that because, uh, and by faith I mean like, I'm not just going off of someone's word because I can actually, test that and I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, I do get what you're saying, and that is a really good point. Um, and that was only an example I'm using. And so another example, perhaps, even that I could use, and I have another question after this that has to do more with what you said about proving things.
Hmm.
Um, but what about trust? We'll use the word trust, or even having faith in me when I tell you, Will, as I've told you many times before, and as I'm telling you again, that I love you.
Hmm.
If anyone just says that to you randomly on the street, then you might perhaps question it or maybe not believe it fully. Um, but when I say it, and perhaps you don't believe it, but you would it involves a trust in the person saying it. Like my mother, my parents, when they've told me that they have loved me in the past, I trust their character. I trust that they're being honest. I trust that they mean what they say. And so I'm having faith in them and in what they're saying. I'm trusting in what they're saying, that it's true, because I trust in the authority that it's coming from, the statement. But if some random person on the street, like a homeless person, just walked up to my car, knocked on my window, and said, "Oh man, I love you, man,"
Right.
it's not the same, right? I don't trust in them. I don't believe in their authority or trust in their character, that they who they are.
But I think,
Perhaps they do mean it, but yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I think so. To me, it sounds like you could use the word faith, but I feel like, again, it's one of those instances where you can. I feel like faith is almost kind of like a middleman that you could cut out and kind of supplement with either reason or like almost like a confidence. So, like, the reason why you wouldn't just have faith that uh, some random person would just say "I love you" is because uh, you don't have any evidence. First of all, it's just there's no evidence or reason why that person, at least to you, why that person should um, like have uh, feelings in some kind of way for you or care about you at all. But when you talk about like a friendship or between relatives, I think it's more like uh, you do have evidence because you have a history of the things that those people have done for you, or a history of the things that those people have said to you, and um, there's never been an instance where, or at least not many, where it's like you have this idea that they don't have some kind of kinship towards you. So I feel like the word faith can almost just be replaced by confidence. So like I'm confident uh, that my mom loves me. I'm confident that I care about my friends and my friends care about me. Because there's never been a situation that I've been in where I was led to believe otherwise. So, yeah, I feel like, you know, if you're talking about, um, let me see, if you're talking about like reason, and you're saying that like faith, well, the reason I have faith is because it's reasonable, or my faith is based on reason. I feel like what you can basically do is, I mean, that's valid, but I feel like it makes things a little bit more confusing, and you can kind of just cut out the faith part and just use the reason part. Um, if they're synonymous, then you can just say, well, it's reasonable that my parents love me, or it's reasonable that my friends love me, or that I love my friends. Do you see what I mean? Hello? Oh, you cut out. You're muted. Rip. Today is not the day for mics.
Hello.
All
There we
right,
go.
I can hear you now.
Um, I'm thinking about that. What I'm thinking right now is just that it still it still involves a reliance, a trust. I think confidence was a great word that you used.
Hmm.
Um, in the other, in order for you to at first, um, at first take what they're saying to be true. Like when I brought up the example of the homeless person coming up and just saying through my car window, "Hey, I love you, man." I did not say that it was not true. I don't know if it's true or not. Um, but I do that does not change whether it's true or not, whether I believe it or not. Um,
Right.
but the whether I believe it or not would depend on whether or not I have faith, or we could say trust, or I have confidence in their character, in their trustworthiness as a person to say what they really mean. Um, and the same thing with the parents. And in order for me to trust that what they're saying is true, I could perhaps say, well, look at all these instances where they have come through. Look at all the instances where they have been honest, where they've shown loving actions towards me. Um, and those definitely do point, I would say, rather than to the to the truthfulness of the claim, to the trustworthiness of the person, or the trustworthiness of the source of their authority to say I love you and to really mean it, and for you to then trust when they say it. You
Hmm.
can point back to those things, but I would say rather than those things pointing directly as whatever the word is, it starts with an E, something proof, empirical proof
Oh yeah.
that the claim is truthful, to proof which you can take, and I believe you should take, as evidence that your source, the authority where the statement "I love you" is coming from, is trustworthy, and they say what they mean, and they really do mean what they say, to that being true, and that you can therefore trust them when they say "I love you."
Yeah. Now I think so. This is getting. I think this is going in a good direction because what I wanna another thing I wanted to bring up was so
Mhm.
like you said, you can't know the um, authenticity behind someone's, or at least a claim like "I love you." It's really something that you would almost have to be inside someone's head to really be able to verify. So it's like you can even, and it can even go in the other way. If someone's, I mean, I'm sure there's some parents out there who genuinely maybe don't care about their kids, and they might lie to them and say like, I love you, but they might actually not mean it, and maybe there's still, I mean, it would be a very strange case, but maybe there's parents who, still do good things for their children, and there's nothing, they're not giving their children any reason to believe that they don't love them, but maybe that's just how they feel. Um, I don't think that's a very common case. I mean, I think most of the time parents that don't care about their children just, uh, it's pretty clear when that's the case. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but
I think that's a good example though. That's a good point.
yeah, so I'm just saying it's possible that out there somewhere there may be a parent who just doesn't really care about their kid, but they still, um, I don't know, they're actually it's kind of maybe that's not such a good example because if you don't care about someone but you don't want them to know that, and you don't want to give them any reason for them to believe that you don't care about them, then in a way that is kind of you caring about them because you would care how they reacted to that. But
That is true.
yeah, so let me see if I can. Well, I guess what I'm saying is,
Well, I
um,
think I think to save the example, they could be coerced to do so.
yeah. So, but mostly what I'm saying is, so there's this absolute truth that exists. There's an objective truth that is true, whether or not someone believes it. So if a random person said "I love you" to me, then I would say, well, I don't really know what to make of that because I don't know anything about you, which would be my evidence towards trusting your claim. But at the same time, I can't get inside your head and I don't know your actual feelings. So there is a possibility that you do genuinely care about me, or that you do genuinely love me. And so I would say that um, where faith comes into play with that, uh, I'm not sure that I would even really invoke it because I think my reaction to that would just be that I don't know and I can't know if that's the truth at this time. Um, and maybe if I got to know the person a little bit more and, we developed a good friendship, then I could start, you know, building that as evidence towards uh, their claim. But until then, I think I would just say that I wouldn't be very confident in their claim because I personally don't have any evidence um, to be able to trust it. Um,
Yeah,
now,
yeah. And I think. Oh, sorry. I didn't
oh
realize
no,
you were going to
yeah,
continue.
yeah, I was just segueing. Yeah, continue.
Um, I think it could be helpful even to bring another example of the same sort of someone saying that they will do something. Like if I say, "Will, I'm going to drive over to your place tomorrow so that we can spend some time together," which I'm not saying, by the way.
Okay.
Um, but if I were to say that, and I would really mean it, actually, I did. I really meant that I was going to come to your place tomorrow, and so that we can hang out at 5 o'clock.
Hmm.
Your ability, or not even your ability, but whether or not you believe my claim, have faith in my claim, trust in that claim, would mean you trusting in me as an authority, like we said before, to be truthful. Whether or not you believe it does not change. Even if I had shown so much proof that I would not, like I had been saying that for dozens and dozens of weeks and had never done it.
Hmm.
Um, but then I say it again, and I really mean it, and I'm actually going to. You have plenty of reason not to believe me and not to have faith in what I'm saying, but that does not change the fact that I actually am going to be coming to your house
Right.
tomorrow at
Like I,
5
I
p.m. That
can't
I mean what I'm saying.
I can't know that you
Yeah.
wouldn't do it.
And you can't, and if you have so much reason not to believe that I did, there's still no way for you to actually concretely prove that I am not. You have reason to believe I will not be, but you cannot prove that I will not be coming to your house tomorrow, or for that fact that I will be coming to your house tomorrow. Um,
Right.
it's a matter of trusting in my authority as a person that I am truthful in what I'm saying, and you don't trust that I'm truthful because I've never shown it.
Right. Now I think, see, to me, I completely agree with that. But I think the issue is, for me, that's kind of where that whole thing stops. Like
Mm.
it's like like we said before, confidence. If I have confidence that you're not going to show up, when I say that I have confidence that you're not going to show up, I'm not saying that I know that you won't show up or that I'm 100% certain that you won't show up. What I'm saying is, I have all of these factors, all of these variables that have led me to conclude that there's a very good likelihood that you won't show up. But again, it's just a likelihood. It's a probability. And so, it's kind of one of those things where it's like there's an absolute truth in this case that you might have it dead set on your mind that you actually are going to show up, and that would be considered an absolute truth. And there's nothing that I could do about that, and there's nothing that I could do to know that. So, to me, where it stops is at my confidence level. So, and I think really everything that we do in life is something that we do with a confidence level. We can't. There's no way that we can be absolutely certain about everything or anything. Well, in my opinion, because I feel like in order to be absolutely certain about something, you first need to. Well, actually, that's a good question. So could you be absolutely certain about something? I might have to rethink about that. Um, I would say. I would say that you. Okay, yeah. I would say that you cannot be absolutely certain about anything because, in order to be absolutely certain about something, you would have to know personally for yourself the exact laws and nature and intention of the universe. Because, for example, um, you could be. Uh, Let me see. Yeah, you could be absolutely certain that the laws of gravity are true, and we have not demonstrated that they've never not been true. But there is nothing to say that maybe tomorrow, because of the way the time or time in the universe works, that's just going to all of a sudden change. Um, and I don't have any reason to believe that because there's no evidence that shows that tomorrow the laws of gravity are going to be different. So I wouldn't put confidence in that. But at the same time, I also cannot prove that it wouldn't happen. Um, but I think the issue is that a lot of people say just because they say that, well, if you can't prove that it won't happen, then therefore it could happen. And I think that's where the issue kind of is because that's where you start getting contradictions. Because if you say that like I can't prove that tomorrow the laws of gravity won't be the same, but I also can't prove that they will be the same. If you're saying that those two possibilities could be true, then that would be a contradiction because they can't both be the same and not be the same at the same time. So I would say that it's not really useful to use the fact that you can't disprove something or the fact that you can't prove any claim as justification that it could be true, because you could use that in the opposite direction and make a contradiction for that. Um, so in short, I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying to remember what the last thing you said was because I don't want to get too off track here. Um, what was the last thing you said? Oh.
Um,
I think I remember. It about like, it was like I can't know that you wouldn't come over to my house tomorrow because uh, I don't. Well, ultimately it would be up to you. So
yeah, and it's not a question of reason of figuring out whether or not I actually will be coming to your house tomorrow or not.
right,
It's a matter of trust in me of whether or not I'm being truthful about what I'm saying or not.
right. Yeah, that's a good example of like, um, having good reason to believe something and having confidence in something and having evidence for something, but at the same time, you get an unexpected result. And that's definitely true, and that definitely happens in science all of the time. Um, and in fact, that's what makes science stronger and more reliable every day or every time there's some kind of revelation, because every time that does happen, we now have a more accurate model of how things work in the universe. So, and the proof of that is that over time, science has become more reliable. There's more consistent results within science. Um, so, uh, I would say that it's again there you can't attain absolute truth or absolute certainty, but the best thing that you could do is have confidence in something based on what you observe around you and what you know or what you think you know, and based on all of that information, then you kind of compute almost a likelihood in your head of how you know uh, how confident you are in something. Like I think another good example would be um, this is a good example. So there's a lot of I've seen a lot of videos just in the past of scientists doing really dangerous things or to what might look like dangerous things to people who don't understand science that well, or the science that they were doing in the video that well. For example, there's this experiment where if you have a ball with a spike on it and you release it over like almost like a pendulum over a really wide room, and it's going to swing away from you and then swing back to you. And the scientist will just stand in the exact spot that they released the ball in. And even though you have this really massive ball coming at your face with a spike, they don't move or flinch because they know that based on the laws of physics, it would be impossible for that to impale them or hurt them. Whereas the layman or anybody who doesn't know about conservation of momentum, they would probably have some kind of reaction towards that. So I think it's interesting that it appears that um, um, oh yeah, so I think it's interesting that even though the scientist can't have this absolute certainty that maybe the laws of physics would be slightly different, that there's something that they're missing, even though they can't have that absolute certainty, they are still confident enough in what they've observed that that they are willing to do an experiment like that. Whereas someone who doesn't know everything that that scientist knows would definitely not have the confidence level of doing that. And I think that's a good thing because, there's if the scientist told a person to do that, for example, um, I don't think that a person should take the scientist's word for that without demonstrating it, or at least rigorously showing that it would be impossible to be harmed from that experiment. So, and even then, it's like it's still kind of scary. But I think that people shouldn't just believe scientists. I think we're stuck in a situation where we kind of have to in some situations because we don't really have a choice. It's not like we can just take 4 years out of our life to go study something just to get a definitive answer. Um, and it's generally just easier to take a scientist's word for something because you have a confidence in the fact that they went to school for 10 or 20 years and that they, over that period of time, if you do the same thing for 10 or 20 years, you'd think you'd have a pretty well formed grasp on whatever you're studying. And again, that could not be the case, but you are forming a confidence level even just by what seems like just blindingly trusting someone because you're saying, okay, what are your credentials? Have you done? Is there anything in your portfolio that shows that you've, worked on these projects and that you have a good track record? Maybe you're an engineer and you build, really solid, stable bridges. Um, that's the kind of person that you would be justified in having a high confidence level in trusting. Um, so I guess to me, I wouldn't use the word faith to describe my level of trust towards someone. I would say if I don't know who they are at all, and they're claiming that they're a scientist and that they are trying to tell me something about reality, um, and I don't know who they are, and I don't have access to their credentials, I would not have a high confidence level in believing what they're saying. Um, Whereas if they were a very renowned scientist, then I would. But what I'm not doing is I'm not saying, okay, yeah, what you're telling me is absolutely true. I'm just saying that, okay, based on your research, uh, you've come to this conclusion, and you know, you seem like you care about the subject and that you spent a lot of time on it, and so that would be how I would put my trust towards them. But I don't think I would use faith, and the reason for that is because I think, again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about faith and reason, and you don't just want to have faith in something that's not reasonable. And if I said that I had faith in them and that faith was based on reason, um, my reason would just be all of the confidence level reasons that I stated, and I would just kind of cut out the word faith and just use confidence or trust. Um, so
Well, and what I'm trying to say is that those words are very similar, if not the same. Although I believe that you can probably bring a little bit more, or perhaps not even. I think that those words are very similar in what they're using, and you can get very nitpicky about what each one is, using dictionary definitions and things. But in practice, I don't think that they're that different. But you are saying that you do think they're different, and so I'm curious to hear now your definition of faith, if you have one, since you're saying that they are different.
okay, yeah, so that's a good question. Um, yeah, well, I guess the thing is that I and it gets a little confusing because I mean, there's the Hebrew definition of faith, which we kind of established isn't like, that's the what we're referencing here, but the fact that there are different definitions for faith to begin with to me is uh, kind of confusing. But I
Well,
guess
I would like to say something more about Hebrews when after this.
okay. But yeah, I guess what I would say my definition of faith would be is, first of all, I agree with you. I think that faith is the same, or at least in the context that I was describing, having faith in a scientist, having trust, confidence in a scientist. I think those are all synonyms, and I wouldn't really describe faith as otherwise. The only thing that I would say is that I think that it would be redundant to use the word faith in that situation because, first of all, it could seem confusing based on other definitions that exist out there or other interpretations that exist, but also because it's kind of used as a kind of just a reference towards what I'm actually saying, which is trust or confidence, which is a very concrete words. When you hear those words, you're like, yes, I know exactly what that means. Whereas when you hear faith, you're more like, well, what do you mean by faith? So I guess what I'm really saying is that I would just not use the word faith because I just think it makes things a little bit more confusing. Whereas I'm not necessarily saying that faith has a different definition to me. It's just that I think that it could just make things a little bit more confusing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense,
Okay.
and that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all. To just think of them as synonyms, there's a lot of synonyms in the English language.
Yeah.
And so I think for our purposes here, we can say that they just are synonymous. But I'm going to think about that more. So
Okay.
perhaps there are more elements to faith that I haven't thought about yet, which I believe is true.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be learning my whole life.
This rolls
But
pretty deep.
yeah, um, but so then about Hebrews, what I think it brings kind of another element to our definition and what we're talking about is, like I was saying, it's important to understand where the Hebrews are coming from.
Yeah.
They're having a really hard time believing because they've seen their leaders killed. They themselves are being persecuted and killed because they believe in Jesus. And so their faith or their trust in the Lord, in Jesus' power, is being tested. Um, that he really does love them, that
Hmm.
he really is real, that he really was who he said he was, our Savior, that he will save us, that all things will be made right. Is this really true? Um, and he is, I believe, reminding them to look back. If you continue reading past that, Hebrews 11:1,
Hmm.
he brings up examples from the past, from the scripture. You can actually go and read about each of the stories he brings up in the Bible. They're all from the Old Testament, um, about examples of people who had faith, not that in and of themselves, but what that faith led them to do and what they had faith in. Um, he says, "For it is by the people, for by it, that is by faith, the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible." And he goes on, he talks about, by faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And he looks at lots of more examples to say we have reason for believing in what we believe. We have seen the author himself. I have seen Jesus. I know, actually, there's debate on whether or not he actually was an apostle who saw Jesus. So forget that. But even to go back to the original, to Jesus himself, why have faith in Jesus? Well, he gives us reason to have faith in him. We can't know for a fact that what he is saying is true, though it is, and I believe it is. But we can have faith in what he's saying because we see what he's doing. We see who he is. We trust in who he is, that what he says is true. And then his followers spread the same thing to other people. We have faith that this is true. And now things are getting hard. Things are getting difficult, and it's getting harder to believe that this is actually true. Do we doesn't just leave because there's this new evidence, our suffering, that has been brought up against our understanding that Jesus loves us and that he is going to save us?
Right.
And the author is saying, no, our faith that we trust in God's character and Jesus' love for us, that Jesus is who he said he was, our Savior, this assures us what we've seen, what we've heard, what we know to be true because of what we have seen is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. This leads us to know that though we are suffering now, there has to be a way to fit this into our belief, our trust in Jesus as our Savior, and in God as sovereign over all things.
Yeah. I see where you're coming from. I don't think I have any problems. Well, I think the one thing that I do have a slight problem with out of that is, we're talking about uh, the state that the Hebrews were in, where they were put, like you said, they were challenged. Their faith was essentially challenged because, um, they were putting it towards Jesus, and they were still in such a really poor, um, living situation. And I think that would be an example of, you know, in that case, assuming that, uh, the Bible is correct, and Jesus is uh, the Lord and Savior, that they would essentially have reason to not believe in him, even though that there's an objective truth that he does exist. Um, and I guess what I'm getting at is, uh, there could. Okay, this is what I'm getting at. So, naturally, we have tools that we use to determine and try to figure out what's true. And those tools are based on our observations, um, our sensory inputs, our vision, our taste, our touch, whatever. And that's all that we have. Um, and although now we have technology, which is an extension of that. But what I'm saying is we're still limited. We don't have absolute intuition of these things that could be true. And I guess what's conflicting about it to me is that, um, if God was is that God would be aware of this. God should know our own limitations. And so if God knows our own limitations about what we can understand and what we can figure out and observe, then to me, I find it strange that we could be punished for using our own natural tools that he would be aware about to induct conclusions that are not true, or at least that don't lead to him being 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 real or being good or anything like that. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like uh, God would almost want to give you this intuitive reason to believe in him, or at least give you the tools to be able to uh, prove with at least a very high confidence level that he does exist. And I guess you could say that, the history of what's documented in the Bible is that is that the that is what he's providing you to believe in him. Um, but I would say the issue with that is that it's still limiting in the fact that, okay, here's an example. If you're at a job and your boss tells a coworker of yours to tell you that he wants something done, um, you would be inclined to believe that he or she's telling the truth because based on what they're telling you to do, you might know, okay, he told me to do that earlier, or that is something that needs to be done. Therefore, it makes sense if he told someone else to do this, and maybe that that he's busy with something right now, so he can't tell you personally. So there's reasons to believe that someone who is kind of carrying on a message from an authority would be truthful or trustworthy. But at the same time, there's nothing that could stop a coworker from just, either lying to you or just maybe misinterpreting what the boss actually said. And there even could be a situation where, maybe in a very abstract sense, there is no boss, but there's this person who is appealing to an authority because they know that if they said that this command or this message came from someone higher than them or higher than you, that you'd be more inclined to believe it or do what they say. So, I have this issue with the whole idea of these things in history happening and using that as almost a what was I saying? I kind of got off track, but I think I mostly completed my thought. So if you want to respond to that or elaborate on that.
Yeah, so you're saying that like just appealing to history as the messages that we have been passed down to us about what has happened
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily completely reliable,
Right.
as there's no way to prove. We've been talking about faith. There's no way to prove that they are being honest in what they are writing.
Right, and just real quick, I'll let you finish. But it's not only just not being honest, but it could be that they really do believe that they are being honest. But it could just be that there's genuinely something that they've misinterpreted that they have no control over. So I just want to include that in there.
Yeah, good. I like that. And there is an entire branch of biblical studies, just I guess you could just call it biblical criticism, which is all about trying to discern the empirical believability of the claims made in the Old and the New Testament. Was Jesus a real person? Did he actually say blank or blank? Or was this something that was inserted by the author that may well be true from what they understand and what they have deduced and understood through other experiences they've had? But is it actually what literally happened? If you were to teleport back in time, you would hear this.
All
or
right,
see this.
hello.
Right.
Oh, have you been gone this whole time, Isaiah?
Yes, I have. What's up?
Oh, dang.
What did I miss?
We had some pretty epic conversations, Chris.
I mean, we've been talking for like an hour.
Yeah.
Can you summarize it so I can jump in and give my 2 cents?
Um, we've been talking about faith the whole time, right?
This is unreal. Continue. Sorry, I was just giving my 2 cents. Sorry, I gotta be quick about my 2 cents. So,
well, what we're trying to think about is kind of faith. We talked about faith as a trust. Perhaps we could use that as another word just for faith, in someone else's authority for something that you can't prove yourself. It's kind of basically what we've been talking about overall.
leaving your destiny in something else's hands. Yep.
Well, you could believe that. That could be something you have faith in. But why would be the question.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically what it was. Is we're just talking about
Yeah.
is faith really just synonymous with confidence and trust, and anything that has to do with how um, what your reasoning is for believing in something, and
It's just not based on fact.
well, right. But the thing is, so there was another thing that we mentioned, which is facts would be synonymous with absolute certainty or absolute truth, and
Exactly.
that's something that we is something that is unobtainable for our limited understanding and our limited ways of collecting and analyzing information, because there's no way that we can, unless we could disprove everything against a claim, there is no way that we could have absolute certainty for that claim. And because you could ask the infinite, what if questions, what if there's unicorns out there, or what if there's aliens out there, we cannot disprove that now, but that shouldn't mean that.
Nah, that's just semantics. That's just over there moving the goalposts.
Well, what it's doing is it's essentially saying, because it's the thing is, what's frustrating is that it's technically valid, because there is no way that you can disprove that stuff. But what isn't useful
Well,
is
that's
that.
a problem with faith. It's literally something you can't disprove. It's just a person saying whatever they feel like. But it's just like, yeah, that's definitely possible. It's
Well,
definitely something that could happen,
and another, yeah, and
but there's no
another.
way of knowing if it's true.
Right. And so another thing that we were talking about, me and Chris were talking about, was that there's actually, I mean, there's several definitions for faith, and they might differ from person to person. That's one of the reasons why it can just be a confusing thing to talk about, because if you're saying the definition of faith is the same as confidence, there's not really a problem with that, because if you're saying faith is confidence, then you're not saying that something is either true or not true. You're just saying that there's a certain likelihood
Hold
that
on.
something is true.
There's nothing wrong with believing that, but here's the problem. The problem is people have such a strong conviction over something that's most likely not true. Because what substantial evidence do we have to prove the claim? If anything, it has the same level of like what's the word, validity. It
Hmm.
has the same level of validity as something like crazy and absurd. So why should I take that like belief over anything else that has like factual stuff that's been tested behind it? Like, why should I believe something like that?
And that's true. I think I actually mentioned that. I was saying that there was the
Like,
difference between
it's
having. Oh, go on.
it's illogical.
Yeah, I was saying there was a difference between having faith in like a scientist, for example, and having faith of just any claim that you could make, and the difference would be that you have evidence and reasons to believe a scientist over, um, and you can also test things that scientists are claiming. You can actually run the test and observe for yourself that what they're saying is true, and it doesn't mean it's going to be true every time, but it means that you have a high confidence level in trusting them or believing that their claim is true. Whereas
But
if you
I'm
make a
having a
claim that you
brain
can't
blast though
test, okay,
because it's comparable to like an imaginary friend because you can think it's there, you can say it's there, and everybody's gonna be like, all right, cool, you do you, bro. But it's like, bro, what does that do? Like, what does it do for you? It does nothing. It's just there
um, yeah,
in your mind.
um,
It's something your mind came up with.
that's an interesting point.
It's a construct of your mind. It's your mind. It's a comforting thing in your mind to make you feel better about something.
It's
But what do you have? What do you have substantial for proof to prove the claims? Like what what is there to prove that such a thing exists? Nothing,
yeah, well,
because it's a construct of your mind.
so I
It's a
really like
construct of your mind because it's something you believe in your mind, but no one else does.
right
And other
now.
people that believe it just have certain circumstances that are similar to you,
But here's the
so they
thing.
feel they feel it.
Here's the thing though. Here's the thing. I agree with what you're saying. I
Just
have to
gonna
cut
say
you
here's
off
the
because you're
thing.
gonna keep. I like where you're going with this, but I gotta insert my thoughts here. Um, so the imaginary friend scenario, for example, there's two ways this can uh, that this can go. There's one where someone is just making something up, maybe to make themselves feel better, or maybe for some other reason. But there could also be a situation where their mind is constructed in such a way that they really do believe, or they really do see, or they really do feel like they can interact with this imaginary person that is real for them, but is not real for everyone else. And so they would be inclined to try to convince everyone else that that person is real, even though that it's not real for anyone else. Now, it wouldn't be, in that case, um, it would be very frustrating to uh, kind of discern what's true at that point. Because if it's true for one person and not true for another person, it something can't be both true and not true at the same time. So if it's true for one person, then it's true in general, but it's just
No,
not useful.
all I'm saying is like what they perceive to be true is just from their mind. It's not reality. That's all I was basically just trying to say.
Yeah.
It's just something they perceive to help themselves get through the day. It's just something to comfort them,
At that
something to make
point,
themselves feel better.
now, yeah. So at that point,
If
you could
anything, it's a
say
delusion.
at that point you could say that it is real for them because they genuinely can interact with this being. But when they start getting into the territory of saying this
Well,
being
not
also
necessarily because it claims
hold on, when they get into the
it's not
territory of
true.
saying that that being that they see also exists for everyone else, that's different, and there's not really a way to experiment with that because I mean,
Well,
if
even then, it's still not true because the claims they make about such a being, the being's not capable of it because the being doesn't exist because it's in their mind.
right, right. So if they're saying, so if they have this imaginary friend that exists for them, and they're claiming that this imaginary friend can maybe move objects in the real world that both you and me can see, then that would be false. Now, if they, for them, if they could see that and someone else couldn't, um, then I would agree. I don't know if I would say that they were. I mean, this is a really extreme circumstance that we're talking about, because if what then you say whose reality is true, because if one person sees something move in reality and another person doesn't, the only way that you can really discern who has the actual
Well, reality is everything we perceive,
right. So that's exactly right.
but but everything he's perceiving isn't true because it's just in
But
his
now,
mind.
Isaiah, let me give you this situation.
It's just
Say,
a false image. It's just a false projection in his brain.
but
It's just like a little spark in his brain. It's just his brain working. It's just his
I
brain
understand
trying
what
to
you're
find
saying.
meaning and purpose.
I understand
Could
what
I
you're saying.
chime in here?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
actually,
Go
before
ahead.
I just want a small thing that I want to say. Just a little food for thought. If everyone had that delusion, then there would be no way of saying that they would be delusional because they would all perceive the same thing. That's all I wanted to say. All right, you got the floor,
But
Chris.
we
No,
all
no, no.
don't because everybody's different.
That's true. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. You have the floor, Chris.
That's what I was gonna say. You were saying that what we perceive to be reality is what reality truly is.
Right.
But what if those two people, both they're the only ones who can observe it. They both observe the same thing, but both of them have the same brain condition, and so they perceive something that is not actually real. And so, what would be there to stop them from believing that it was actually real?
Right.
Well, just the way
Is
we
it real
think.
then?
Well, just the way we think. Two people are going to have the same idea.
So I
And
would.
another
Oh
thing,
yeah.
when you're spreading a certain image of something, people are going to start like seeing that image in their brain. Like it's just going to come to them naturally because that's going to be the image that comes into their head.
So it's
So
real.
it's not well in their mind, I guess. But I'm saying like the claim that you're making is it's like you think the imagination, the delusion is bigger than it actually is, and it's just like a way your brain functions.
Well, I would like to try to attempt to answer Chris's
Sure, go
question.
ahead.
Chris's question about what you were saying, Isaiah, which is so is it real? And I think what I would say is like you said again, Isaiah, you're making a lot of good points about how it's reality is just what you perceive. So everyone has their own map of reality. Everyone has their own different reality. Maybe colorblind people, I mean, they can't see colors just like someone else might be able to see colors. So it's like, okay, does the universe does it have
Do blind
colors or does it
people
not have
think?
colors? What?
Do blind people think?
I will address that at another time. um,
What do they think of? Do they...
hold on, hold on. Okay, so so I will. This is kind of what I'm getting into. But no, I mean that's a good point.
Nah,
It's
bro. I was trying to think of that, bro. That shit's
no,
so
I mean
sad.
that really is a good point because they have a different map of reality that we do. So for them,
They think of the void, bro. That's sad.
for them, they can't picture reality like we can.
They be thinking of that shit on the static or the TV.
But they can still verify things that we can see with our eyes with other sensory devices that they have, like
Oh
touch or
man.
smell. So if you say to a blind person that there's a table in front of them, they can't see it, but they can still feel it, and if they can feel it, then they can verify what you're seeing that they can't. So there's still a way to kind of communicate
But can
to
they
each
see like
other.
the? Can they see the shape through like obviously it's like can they understand the shape? They won't be able to imagine it on a
Well, yeah, you can
paper.
understand a shape if you close your eyes and feel something. So it's the exact same with a blind person.
But would
Um,
they imagine lines? Is what I'm saying because they don't. How would they?
I'm
How
pretty
would they know?
sure. I'm pretty sure they can. The human brain is a pretty amazing piece of
I think
equipment.
I think you can still imagine 3D space if you're blind.
Yeah, and even there's even been cases reporting that blind people, even though they can't see, the part of the brain that actually forms images, blind people just the only thing that's wrong with them is their eyes. They can't take light as input, but the imaging processing of their brain still works,
What
which
about
means
color? Do you think they'll ever imagine the color or no?
I mean, it's possible. Bats do that. I mean, and they have bats are blind. So it could be
But
a
how do they
case.
imagine the color?
Let me actually chime in here. This is perfectly gets into
Yeah, this is
something that
off
I was
topic.
about to
I'm bad.
say.
All right.
No, I don't think it's off topic. I do not think a blind person can see color because color is just our perception of light in different ways. It's being refracted in different ways and reflected in different ways through things, and they can't see light. Um,
But I
Yeah.
can't see it. But
and
I was just talking about like imagine.
I don't think so.
I mean,
That's a good
Because
yeah.
they have no
point.
referent for it.
Yeah, that's a good point because color is basically processed through your eyes. But the thing is, color is processed through your eyes, but that information is still being sent to your brain for imaging, for image processing. So I don't know if I would say that they can't see colors
Hmm.
because it's not your uh, the ultimate destination of all this information is your brain. So your eyes are clearly encoding whatever this light information
Oh,
is,
he said it.
and then your brain is like decoding it into something that it can
Oh, he
understand.
said it again.
So I
Mm.
think I think there's again I'm kind of appealing to an authority here, but I've read articles that bats actually have the ability to um, even though they're blind, they have the ability to see different colors to determine what might be a threat and what might not be a threat. Um, so something that's like a red dot for them, based on sonar, could be considered a threat. Uh,
Mm.
Again, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's based on research. Um, but it's debatable. It's up for debate. But so getting back into the topic, which was how do we how do we know the real map of reality? Everyone has a different map of reality. There is an objective map of reality as far as we know, and we can all get together and communicate and talk about each of our own maps of reality and compare that to what we experience through uh, our senses. And if one of us doesn't agree with the other, then um, basically what we're forced to do is just see if that happens for someone else or another person. If it doesn't happen for them, then we're kind of forced to conclude that uh, their map of reality is wrong.
Yeah,
So, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily is. It could be that all of ours are wrong and they're the only one with the right map of reality.
but it's
Um,
unlikely.
it is probably unlikely, um,
It'd be some
because
crazy shit if we were all wrong.
yeah, but
That's kind of improbable.
there's physical things that we can't really refute. For example, there is no map of reality out there for any human being that will deny, uh, you know, if they're running into a wall, they cannot deny that they're hitting a brick wall, even if they're blind or they don't have any kind of nervous system. Uh, it doesn't change the fact that they are still hitting that wall. So there is an objective map of reality that we know of. I mean, you could go one step further than that and say, like, are we all just brains in a vat? I don't know if that's very constructive to this conversation because um, that's kind of like, is everything just a simulation? In which case, we would all kind of be our own objective maps of reality. So I don't think that's really useful. I think we can all agree that for the most part, what we know or what we observe is that there is an objective map of reality, something that is objectively true, and we're all just trying to work together and uh, communicate and get as close to that as possible. Now, that map of reality includes, I think, um, belief in God and faith, because when you talk about religious experience, for example, there's a lot of people that say that they've had really religious experiences. And actually, Chris, I want to ask you this as well. I want to um,
Yeah.
ask you if you believe in miracles and what your definition of a miracle would be.
That's what I was about to say. We need
Yeah.
to define miracles before we can answer that
Yeah.
question. Um, I I would say yes to the blanket statement. Um, and by miracles, perhaps we could mean something happening that would not make sense, or doesn't fit our. We could use the same thing we've been saying. Doesn't fit our map of reality. We could say, I won't say that. That doesn't fit our kind of understanding of how nature works or how natural reality should work.
Yeah.
Whether that be like an apparition, so something appearing there that shouldn't be, or a healing, or things like that. Like I would classify those as miracles.
Hmm. So something that now, um, so basically something that happens almost against the laws of nature that we experience and we observe.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I'm not holding fast to that definition for the rest of my life now, but I think that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Against?
I was also well, yeah. So I guess like what I'm saying is like something supernatural would be something that is beyond natural.
So
So
like someone levitating?
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
if
that would fit within the definition that we
in a
have.
circumstance where someone shouldn't be levitating, if they're levitating, I would definitely say that's a miracle.
Oh, then that shit ain't real.
um, well, there are things that happen that we can't explain, but I don't know if I would go as far as to say it was a miracle. I don't personally
Well, the
have any.
reason why I say it's not real is because within the confines of science, it could somehow in some way, like it could be explained.
Right, right. Well, so yeah, it
Like
could just
even if we
be
don't understand what's causing it, we have theories
right. It's
about
like
it.
that saying that magic is just science that we don't understand, and
Like if I see Josh just flying down the street because he can't drive, he ain't got a car, just see his ass flying down the street, that ain't gonna happen. That's
right,
just in my head right now. I just made that up. That's not gonna happen.
yeah. So I agree. I don't know. I would say that for me, I think of a miracle as something that is just natural phenomena that um, maybe either people don't know all of the variables behind, or just that we haven't gotten to that level of understanding of reality.
But
Um,
Chris, the example you
Hmm.
used about medicine, now that can be explained. The person just got extremely fucking lucky.
well, well, I
Wait,
mean,
what? I didn't catch what you said.
yeah,
Like if a person's on the verge of death and like the doctor's saying like that person is gonna die no matter what, and they take medicine and they live, they just got extremely lucky.
well, the
That
thing,
that could be true. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
it
But
could
it
be,
wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't a miracle. It was explainable.
but I think the issue is, Isaiah, is that the reason why it was considered a miracle is because there was no way for them to explain why that worked or why they were extremely lucky. Um, and when you
But I'm
can't do
saying.
that,
But
it's
I'm saying
almost
it's
like
not like it's not. It's not supernatural because obviously there
Well,
was
so
something there.
let me ask something here, which we'll get. I'm assuming this will lead to more questions, which is what I'm hoping.
mm,
What what makes you say that God could not have healed them? I'm assuming there will be things, and I hope there are things that we can then talk about. I'm not saying there is no reason for you to
Well,
think that.
God is medicine, sure. Why not? Like, if he's the embodiment of medicine, sure.
Well, if he's not the embodiment of medicine, if there is
Oh,
a
wow.
real God who does actually exist,
Yeah, if there's a Christian God.
who has supernaturally healed them, what leads you to say that could not happen?
Well, here's a problem with that. There's no way I can prove that that can't happen. But based on what we know, not probable. It was probably the medicine, because that's how we heal people.
But what if they took no medicine?
Well, they didn't take any medicine, and they probably just something they did through their natural life, through just experiencing life, doing their daily life. They did something, or it just passed, or all the antibodies inside their body fought whatever they had. But no, I don't think somebody who's above would just help. I
But
don't,
see, I think we have to specify that this has to be a situation where they've been heavily analyzed to the point where, um, according to our modern understanding of science, there should not have been a way for them to recover naturally. Um, and in which case, that I would say that that's see, because this has happened before in history. There's been
I know that, but
situations.
I'm saying it can be explained.
Well, what I'm
We can
saying is
talk.
it's happened before in history and it's been explained. And so, based on that, I would use that as evidence or some fuel for my confidence level to believe that if it happens again and someone has been healed by some unknown cause, I would say, based on the past, it could just be another instance of that where maybe there's something else to be discovered. Maybe they have some kind of like really rare immune system uh, defect or mutation that allows them to fight diseases easier. And we could actually, if we studied them, I think that could be really useful because we could use that and learn from it and
And
maybe
that's
have
what
better
I'm saying.
medicine.
And the problem with faith is people like they over rely on it. Like no amount of belief is going to save you when you need it the most, unless you're lucky. It's not something you can just draw on like a fucking superpower.
Yeah, I think me and
I
Chris
don't.
talked about that. Um,
I can't. I can't be a nice enough person because
uh,
I've seen nice people suffer. So you can't just be a nice person and expect nice things to happen to you.
yeah, and that's
Well,
kind of
that's if you're putting your faith in your niceness.
Well, if you're a nice person, good things should happen to you. I don't
Why?
because you do good things. You put positivity into the universe. That's literally the antithesis of.
And so why should the universe put positivity back into you?
No, I'm not saying it should or should. I'm just saying based on your
well,
morals and beliefs.
actually, I can kind of answer that, Isaiah, if you don't mind me answering.
Sure, go ahead.
So, I would just say that it depends on what you mean by being nice or doing something positive, and I would define being nice and doing something positive as well, being nice is, I would say, just making someone happy. Um, Not necessarily being nice isn't always doing what's good for someone. So even though you're nice to someone, I wouldn't necessarily count that as doing something positive. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. But I would say doing something positive is kind of, I mean, that's kind of getting back into the morals debate, but I would just say that, again, to me, doing something positive is um, doing something that contributes to the is there what's the word um, contributes to your species thriving, and I think that anything that you do that you can measure that effectively does so is doing something positive. Uh, does that make sense? Do you agree with that, Isaiah?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Does that make sense, Chris?
Sorry, my mom was just talking to me.
Oh
E- yes, it does. What you're saying makes sense. I don't know how to totally agree with it, but that's for another time.
no.
Um,
Yeah.
that like you were saying,
Anyway,
that kind of gets into what we were talking about with morals last time. Um,
Yeah.
my point doesn't change, but I'll just add
what? Wait,
positive.
say what's the point again?
My point is, if you're nice and positive, that you should, that based on what you believe, good things should happen to that person. And if they're in a situation to where if they ask for help, they should receive it. Because I don't see why they wouldn't. They haven't done anything wrong. They're doing positive things for people. They're helping people out, and they're making people happy. They're being nice. But
So,
what I am saying is that based on what we know, none of that even matters.
so Isaiah, are you saying from like a I guess a Christian perspective that being nice and being positive, based on like the Bible, uh, good things should happen to them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
saying, but it doesn't based on what we know.
Right, and that's I mean that's kind of again that's exactly what Ecclesiastes is about is um, you know uh, the same fate could fall on someone who follows all of the rules of the Bible or someone who doesn't believe in God at all or doesn't accept Christianity.
And there's an answer for that. What I am saying is that believing something's going to happen to you positively to help save you from a life threatening event or just something miraculous is going to happen because of how good you are. That's not why. There's reasons for it. Like if
Well,
you want your health to be better, then you're going to have to do stuff yourself to fix your health. No, I'm
can
not.
I
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I would say I see the point you're making, and I would agree with the point you're making that just believing something hard enough doesn't make it happen. Um, but I do just want to interject here that the worldview you have just presented is not a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
Um, are you saying yeah, it is, or
No, I'm saying that's how people live life. Like
So
if
you're
you
just
want to feel
saying
better, you got to go to the doctor.
you're saying regardless, it's
What I was
unprejudiced
speaking,
towards.
I'm not saying like look. All I'm saying is the way we live our life. If we're sick, we go to the doctor. You can ask to get healed, but like before you ask to get healed, the most important thing to do is to get the medicine, whether it's placebo or whatever. You're gonna go get the medicine. You're not gonna just stay at home unless you're crazy and just oh someone help me please and just bro you're not gonna do that because that's not how things work.
well, I would agree. I think I'm not here telling you that you should not go to the doctor if you're sick because God will heal you. No, I believe that medicine is a good part of the world that God has given to us, that God has created. I believe medicine is good. And I also believe that prayer is important, that God can reach into a situation and can supernaturally act
But what would
to.
cause him to act if it's not you being nice and it's not you being positive? Then what would make him help you specifically?
I think that it is having a relationship with Him and as trusting in Him to be who He is. Um,
So it's like a subscription model. If you don't have the subscription, you're fucked in certain situations.
Um, well,
I mean, I would say
All right, let me use the
yeah.
club example. It's like a club. If
Okay.
you're not in the club, you don't get certain benefits. You don't
I
get certain
would. I
perks.
guess I would say yes.
Subscription
That's
was
kind of that's kind of a crude way to put it, but yes. But the club is open to everyone, and God wants everyone to be in the club. Would be perhaps the difference between a subscription service or a club.
yeah. So I mean that makes sense. But so when you were saying that that about prayer, that you have a trust in God that He will do as He will, um, would you use that word trust interchangeably with faith?
Repeat what I said once more, where I
Uh,
use trust.
I believe you said that you know if you pray to God and you have trust in Him, and I was just wondering if you could also if you mean the same if you said pray to God and have faith in Him.
Yes, I think that's a perfect example of using the two words interchangeably.
Okay, so um, there's I'm just struggling with the idea of faith in that context, which I'm glad we brought this up because it is a very commonly used context, praying and having faith that God will answer your prayer. Uh, First of all, um, Chris, do you think that uh, that there's a like a I hear a lot of people talk about like God's plan. I don't know if that's actually something that Christians believe in. If there really is like this.
Nah, it's just a song by Drake.
Oh, why'd you got to steal my joke, Isaiah?
Oh, dude, that's basically it.
um,
I was patiently waiting for Will to finish talking, but you had to jump in. But were you gonna ask what do I think about God's plan?
yeah.
Um, let's see. Well. How I was gonna finish before when I was talking about prayer, I wasn't just gonna end the statement there. I was gonna say I believe that God will answer, or not that God will answer. I believe that prayer is also important to be doing because that is something that is important in our relationship with God. Um, and I was then going to say because I trust and have faith and have reason to believe that it is so, which was going to lead me to say I think that a good idea for perhaps next time would be we've kind of spent the whole entire conversation this time talking about just what is faith in kind of a more general sense,
Hmm.
and even having faith in like a friend to come through on their word.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it could be fun and it could be good to
Well, the
then go, huh?
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say to go into next time perhaps would be things, um, reasons for God's existence. Um,
Chris, can I
because
interject?
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I just have a small complaint about the friend example. The reason you
Mm.
would have faith in a friend doing something, or whatever the friend example was, is because you would have faith in your friend because of prior like experiences with your friend. You wouldn't have faith in your friend for like any other reason. Like you would trust them
Well,
because of, if you know the person.
this is exactly what Will and I were talking about earlier
But
when
if
you
you have
left.
faith in the
Is
person that you
well,
don't know, for like, and you have no prior experience to trust them, then that would just make you fool because you would be more likely to get
well, that,
to,
I
to get deceived.
let me interject here. This is exactly why I was talking. I was just talking about reasons to believe in God and reasons for Christianity, is because I believe there are those. I believe that Christianity is reasonable, and I was saying for the same reason, trusting in a friend is reasonable and makes sense. If I were to say to you, Isaiah, I am going to show up at your house tomorrow at 5 p.m.
I'd be like, yo, what up, dude?
Oh yeah, because you trust me, but prove to me that
But
what
let
I
me
just
use
said is
another example.
true.
If Josh is
Yeah.
pulled up, I call the cops because I have prior experience to where he deceived me.
But prove to me that Josh is doing something in that moment that he should not be doing that is worthy of the cops being called.
Searching
What if
my
he
house
just
on
wants to come say hi?
Google Maps or something, or Google Earth, something like that.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I don't even hear what you said.
I don't think looking at someone's house on Google Maps is pretty trusting.
It's not. It's worth. I believe that situation would be worthy of calling the cops.
He
But the
was
point
looking like a burglar.
the point is that what you're having is trust in, or not trust in this case, in Josh's character, based on prior experience, based on reason you have to think what you think, but you cannot scientifically prove that Josh is up to no good when he pulls up to your house.
I probably could if I got like Vsauce and like fucking Neil deGrasse Tyson. We could probably do like an epic 30-minute YouTube video about the science of Josh behavior.
Yeah. Well, I
That's like a
mean,
whole nother topic.
it is because it gets in. I mean, if you really want to be pedantic about it, you could say it's like if the universe is deterministic, then technically, yeah, you could scientifically prove it. But I think for all intents and purposes, uh, we're I think we can just assume that the universe is at least complex enough to the point where even if it was deterministic, uh, there can still be unpredictable things that can happen. In this case, um, Josh doing something unpredictable like showing up at your house just to say hi. And I think what Chris is saying is that there's you can't know that you can't know for what reason he's exactly showing up. Even though you have good reason to believe that you might know exactly why he's there, you can't really know why he really is there. Um,
Yeah, but you're probably more likely right because of the probability.
yeah, I still think you
Yeah,
should.
yeah, I agree that there's a
Yeah,
probability there.
and you should always, even if it's wrong. Here's like something that I really truly believe is that even if you are wrong about something, I still think it's important to if you're using your confidence level in something, and you really believe something to be true, and it's not, I still think, and you have, if you really believe the reasons for believing it's true is true, I still think that you should follow that because if your confidence in something is false, then eventually you will figure that out. You will find that out one way or another. If you think that if you really deep down believe that you can fly, and you jump off a building, unfortunately you will find out the hard way, but find out nonetheless that what
That
Oh,
you
was a
had.
that'd
good
be
pun.
crazy.
What?
That
I
was a
said
good
that would be
pun.
crazy.
Yeah, it's eventually you will find out that um, what you had confidence in was not true. But now, I mean,
You'll be with Jesus.
that is kind of an extreme example because it's making me sound like I'm saying that if someone thinks they can fly, that they should jump off a building, which I'm
I
I'm not
mean,
saying that. I'm
that's
I'm
where your logic goes,
I'm
but
saying it in a sense where like they don't have to put themselves in a life or death situation. They could easily test it in a safer environment. So I'm not saying that if someone believes something that could lead to their death that they should try it, but what I'm
yeah,
saying
you might
is
want to say that.
that there's a way to test it and there's a way to verify it. Um,
Did you say
Yeah.
test it?
yeah.
Science.
And that gets me just into the final bit of what I was going to say is that I don't believe that you can scientifically in a lab prove that God exists. But I
Uh,
do believe that I do believe that there are other ways to prove that things are true than by testing things in a lab.
Well, yeah. So
you,
that's
you
a good.
you you
Huh?
prove everything through like experimentation, so
Well,
it
yeah,
doesn't have to be in a
but
lab.
yeah, right. So it could either be physical experimentation, which is like doing actual science, chemistry, and physics, and so on, or you can prove it philosophically,
But
which
everything we know about the world has been tested,
um,
or is it something
yes.
that we experience all the time that it doesn't need to be tested?
Well,
Uh,
what we experience all the time is the question of philosophy. Um, and the claim that you made earlier that what we perceive is reality, that is a philosophical claim, pure and simple. Because what if that could philosophically be argued against, but I believe that it is true. That what we see is actually what we can test things on to determine what is reality. That's philosophy right there. And I
I
believe
don't
it's
even know what
true.
just happened. I'm lost. I'm not even gonna lie.
well, I think what Chris is trying to say is uh, that it's more of a thought experiment than something that you can actually materialistically grasp. Like you can't like crack open someone's head and see how they perceive the world. It's more of a thought experiment, and just that you have to accept that everyone is going to see the world differently, and so it's kind of abstract to where you have this idea and you're treating the idea as if it's as if it's true, and that's kind of what philosophy is. So you kind of have, and it's kind of what epistemology is as well, is where you have like, reasons why you should believe something. So I agree that I agree with Chris that it's well, first of all, if there is a God, I'm not saying that you couldn't prove in a lab that he exists. Um, Personally, I wouldn't say that it's likely because based on how I've heard God behave or what he is and what we currently know about science and reality, I would say that it's not likely. But so it's most likely that you'd have to kind of prove his existence through philosophy or through logical deductions. um, or inductions,
Interesting.
which it makes it really up for debate on because and is another thing that I was you know that I have a problem with is that if it's something that is really difficult to grasp and to lead to a conclusion of God, I have a hard time understanding because he would know this. So if God would know how difficult it is, or even how impossible it is, um, I'm not saying that it's difficult. Or I'm not saying that it's impossible to prove God. I'm just saying that so far, for some people, it seems impossible. But I don't understand why he would not give us the necessary tools so that we could figure out that he himself said these things that he wants us to do, and um, wasn't kind of like going back to my analogy about like the boss and your coworker. If my coworker told me to do something that was really insane and said that the boss told me to do it, I would want to go and ask the boss directly if that's what he actually said. Um, Depending on how absurd the request was by the coworker. So and yeah, I mean that's just me personally.
Yeah.
Um,
It, that's a really good question, and honestly, one that I haven't thought about much. That's kind of a new question to me, and I wrote it down. And so I wrote down, why is it so hard to believe in God if He wants us to so much, or why is it so uh, not hard in a personal sense, but even in a logical sense? Why is it
right,
so hard to believe in
but
God even if He wants us to so much?
and I think that's a good way of phrasing it. But I would say that maybe an even more accurate way, from what I'm
Hmm.
trying to describe, is why is it that God why is it that it seems like God has not given us the tools to
Hmm.
induct his existence to begin with, rather than just why are we not born believing in him? Um, if he wants us to, if he knows that we have a very specific way of determining what's true to us, and he doesn't give us the tools to do so um, well, uh, obviously because that's why we're having this whole debate is because there's no clear-cut way to prove God's existence. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of mystery and a lot of questions. Um,
Mm.
so I'm just, I guess, like, why is it that he is aware that we don't have the right tools to um, reasonably, for some of us, that we don't have the right tools to reasonably believe in his existence, while he's aware of this, um, and while he knows that we would rather hear his word over it than someone else who is spreading what they claim to be his word.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I want to make sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, should. Yeah, really good question. And so I think we can probably return to that another time. We've exhausted this part of the conversation quite a bit. Um,
Yeah.
but you asked me a question earlier that I was about to answer, and maybe this can be the last one. We were talking about miracles or about prayer or something.
Hmm.
Um, I can't remember exactly what you asked. I believe it was about prayer, but I can't remember exactly.
Was it about using faith in place of trust for prayer? For prayer?
I think so. And I feel like there's something even past that you asked me, but I can't remember now.
Uh, yeah, I think I didn't get to finish that question because
Mm-hmm.
I was forming a question, and then I was like, "Do you believe in miracles?" And then it's like we kind of got on a sidetrack.
Oh well, perhaps I could say this about miracles. I don't think I said this. It gets right back to kind of the original thing that I was trying to get at with talking about. Well, I
Hmm.
can't remember what it was now, but that the reason why I believe in miracles is not just because I want to, although I want to. Um, it's not just because I try really hard every night before I go to bed to tell myself that miracles exist, but it's because I believe in the authenticity of the claims of the authority. But I trust, we could use that. I trust in the authority of the Bible as coming from God's authority, as God is God who understands all things.
Oh yeah.
which gets to the question of, is it reasonable to believe in God? Which is kind of why I wanted to
Right,
end
right,
there.
right.
But
Yeah.
perhaps we can think about that and come there next week.
Yeah, so it makes perfect sense because obviously, um, if you have a solid foundation for reason to believe in God, then yeah, it is very reasonable to believe in miracles because that's kind of like it's a package deal. Um,
Yeah.
if God
And
exists,
so
then
if we
He
want to,
perform miracles.
yeah. And so if we want to get at the root of, are miracles real and can miracles happen? You have to ask, does God exist?
Right,
That's where that question has to start.
right. And I do have one more thing before we end. I just wanted
Mm.
to ask. It was so again kind of related to miracles is that to me, the way that I see things is that uh, if God does perform miracles, not really that so much can He perform miracles, but does He? I feel like
Mm.
that's a almost kind of a. I think we talked about this before. Is that like would if God interferes with reality, is that almost in a way saying that He's kind of correcting a mistake? Because
Yes,
if he's interfering with something in reality, it's almost as if saying he has to stop something that's happening because of it's like it was something that he can't just allow to happen.
that's
Um,
absolutely what we're saying.
so
That's,
it's
that's not what I'm saying, but I'll respond.
okay.
Okay.
Um, what I would say is we can look in the Bible, for instance, um, and my family's watching something Marvel. I just heard the theme song start. Um, but we can to look in the Bible, miracles. A lot of times Jesus heals people. Um, that's supernatural, something that happens. And in the story of the Bible, which hinges on the authority of the Bible, which hinges on the existence of the Christian God, to kind of tell you where I'm coming from, um, says that, like we've talked about before, there has been a fall, and things in this world have begun to go turn back into chaos as humanity, the ones who are supposed to take care of this creation, have gone off the rails and chosen to rebel and do what they would like to do and not trust, not believe in God anymore, um, and go off and just do what they like and take the reins into their own hands. And so creation has begun to go back into chaos. And so miracles are God's entrance back into his creation. Not that he left or was not present, but it's special ways that he is being uniquely present in
Right.
different moments. And so healings in the New Testament, when Jesus comes, those are God's restitution, God's recreating of the beauty of his creation. People have leprosy, people are dying, people are sick. When Jesus heals those people, that's God bringing them back to how he created them. I would say that's what a miracle is.
Right.
And in new creation, I would say, in what some people might want to call heaven, when God makes all things new, um, there will be no more quote unquote miracles because all will be as it should be.
Right. Um, but so one of my qualms with that is that um, you know, if there's a condition set in reality where miracles have to exist in the first place, I feel like that's kind of setting a precedent that things are not perfect. And I don't know if I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if I asked you this before, but I believe that you said that like when God created everything, um, it was all perfect. And I don't know. If to me, it's just that you know it. If there was, if you said like God created everything, but it wasn't perfect, then that would kind of make up for it. But to say that like that God, which by the way, if you say that He created everything and it wasn't perfect, that's almost a way of saying that God isn't perfect, and I feel like that's kind of a
Yes.
contradiction.
Yes, I'm not saying that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is like if He created everything and it was perfect from the start, then why were there situations that kind of caused things to go against the way that He wanted them to be? And then His act of performing miracles is almost a way of saying, let me correct that, or let me um, change that, or kind of, set things back on the right track. Because I guess it kind of, everything really goes back to me thinking that there's like, everything is predestined. Because I feel like if there is a God that's perfect and infinitely intelligent and just infinite in every way, that the universe would have to be predestined. Because otherwise, if things could just go in any which way, and it's possible that things could go in a way that he doesn't desire, that that it wouldn't be perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wrote that down, and I'm gonna think about that more this week.
Okay, yeah, because it's
And
kind of a big question.
what else? What I'll say to that now, um, is something that I've heard before, which perhaps I'll want to revise a little bit, but I would agree with it now. Is that God willed the fall, so the fall was part of God's creation, and so things going awry, things going chaotic, was a part of God's plan. That was the question. God's plan.
Yeah.
Um, so here
Oh
we
yeah.
go. Here's an answer. Um, was part of God's plan. The fall did happen in order that God would show himself as a God who can overcome the fall when it comes.
Okay. Yeah.
He
Actually.
isn't just a shaky, weak God who is resting on everything staying in perfect order, who can't fend for himself. No,
Yeah.
he is truly the God of the universe
And
who
actually, we did talk
is
about
all
this.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did talk about this last week as well. I remember you saying now about like that it was an intentional thing where it was like it's almost kind of like a lesson. So it would be like a parent scaring a child to show the child not to do a certain thing. Um,
Mm.
is that
And
analogous?
yes, I would say it's analogous, but I would say that God did not will the fall, or perhaps we could say let the fall happen. It was humanity's fault. They chose to do what they did, and God knew they would choose to do what they did upon creating them.
Hmm.
Um, big questions there, but that God has not, because that would mean the story of our entire reality. The story of our entire reality, from that viewpoint, didn't happen so God could scare us into never doing that again, but to show us that he truly is the God of the universe who can do anything.
Yeah,
I'm
but when you say
It
that,
did in a different way.
yeah, I was just gonna say like if he knew that that was gonna happen, then it kind of takes away from free will because then it's like he kind of almost willed it to happen. So it's like if he did will it to happen, then humanity didn't really have a choice. They were bound to sin. Um, and uh, to me, I'm kind of curious as to why what kind of sense could be made from that for me.
I'll think I'll just think about I'll have to think about this more too. But what I would say to that, what I do say to that, is that knowing fully, actually knowing fully what will happen and making it happen, I would say, I would say are two different things. If you want to look more into this is what I'm going to be researching this week now.
Hmm.
Is look up secondary causality. I remember I learned about it at school, and I looked into it for a while. It's kind of what I'm trying to get at explaining. Is that God is still the first cause. He's still the one who created all things, and he's the one who causes all things. But there is still secondary causality within his creation that we can have, that we still have agency to choose things and to do things,
Okay, well,
that are part
There
of
was
God's cause.
causality.
That would be just like cause and effect. So causality is the ability of something to have it to do something to something else. So
yeah, we can talk about that for
I
next
have,
time.
yeah.
I was gonna
That's
say
my
I
take.
heard that a lot about Berserk.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. Um, but if I could ask you maybe like a refined question then, just a short
Mm-hmm.
one. Would you would you stick to the same like I guess idea that you have where it's, God knew that it was going to happen, or could you also say that um, he just knew that it could happen?
I would say that he knew that it would happen.
Okay, so it wasn't even that like God was just like, oh yeah, so this is a possibility. He was like, this definitely will happen. This is the way that it's going to go.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll say this as perhaps an ending note on our conversation on faith. I don't understand this concept we're talking about now fully. How God can know something will happen fully, and how he is all powerful, and so I would say that he has his hand controls all things, and nothing happens outside of his will, outside of his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the fall still happened, and God didn't want the fall to happen. It was God would love for Adam and Eve to have been with him in those moments when they chose not to be. That is what God desires, and yet it still happened, and it was still part of God's plan. That's confusing. I don't understand that, but I still do trust in God's character and who he is and who I know him to be through the Bible, through reasons why I have for him to exist, and things like that. I trust that he will come through. There's kind of a note on what I'm talking about with trust and faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like any other person, could he lose your trust?
That is a really good question. And this gets at something that one of the podcasts that I listened to is talking about. And I'm going to say no. And I would say because I am convinced that nothing could lead me to lose his trust. Or nothing that could happen could take me to lose my trust in him, because I have such great reason to trust in him, and because I have my trust in him is so strong. And it could lead me to change exactly how I trust in him. Perhaps I think wrong things about him now. And it will lead me to think of him in new ways, in the same way that I could think of multiple things in a new way than how I think of now, even though I fully think that the way I think now is the right way to think. Things will come up, and I will change how exactly I understand God. I will change exactly how I trust in him and what it means to trust in him. But no, I do not believe I will ever lose my trust in God.
Interesting.
Well, I think it's a good stopping point, because I think anything else we talk about is probably going to go on for another 30 minutes. But I think to end it, I would like to say that maybe for next week we could do. I'd really like to talk about a little bit more about reasons why we believe things, and maybe reasons why people choose to
Preconceived
believe.
notions.
Yeah.
Fact.
Or they choose to believe or not believe in God.
Delusion.
So yeah, everything like that I think would be a good.
I think those are 3 big reasons.
Well, perhaps they are, but let's look next week.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Chris and Isaiah.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was thought provoking.
Yeah. Did you record this one too, Will?
I did.
Ooh.
Because I'm gonna have to go back and.
When are we gonna get the opinions of everybody viewing?
Well, I'm probably.
Are you posting these?
Huh?
Are you posting these?
I posted the last one on JW's band just to see.
Yeah.
But
I can't watch it. I can't watch it, dude.
Yeah. I told Chris that you couldn't watch it because you didn't like the way that you were saying stuff. But,
yeah, I
didn't realize that was on JW's band. I thought you just sent it to him.
I mean.
Nah, that would be a big ass file, dude. Or fucking video.
I just posted it honestly just to show like people that I want to show it to. I wasn't really posting it for other people, but
somebody else will see it.
But I think it's kind of cool if someone stumbles across it and they're like, this is kind of interesting.
They're like,
we gotta make a podcast.
Oh, dude, we could have a weekly podcast.
Oh boy.
Oh.
I gotta This is making me think how I should already be taking my words more seriously if we're gonna have a podcast.
Oh yeah, we can't slip up if we have a podcast.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I'm down to do it.
That'd be yeah, okay. Let's I'll see if I can look into that more.
They would be
Well,
like Isaiah.
we'll get a cult following on Spotify.
Yeah.
Dude, they're gonna take my word as gospel. They're gonna be writing that shit down. Like this nigga's a genius.
All right. Well, so are we ending it there tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna order a mic so that I don't.
Chris is gonna clench his fist like Arthur shaking that shit. He's like, damn you. He's gonna be like a fucking 80s supervillain. Goddamn.
Well, hold on. If this is going on the podcast, or if this is going on JW's band, I'll say a word about the podcast I listened to that was really good.
Okay.
Leave a W in chat if I won the debate.
It's
actually now leave an I. Leave a W if Will won, and then leave a C if Chris won.
It's episode 204 of Pints with Aquinas. It's called Faith and Reason with Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin is the guy who was talking. I'm just gonna put it in the chat in case you guys want to look at it.
About a
I'll probably
sneeze.
check it out. Actually,
I'm gonna check it out.
I'm gonna listen to it right after we're done.
I'm gonna check it out later so I can get ammunition.
Also,
I like to research the enemy.
Isaiah, it's not really.
It's a debate.
Yeah, but the thing is that you can have a debate where there's not a winning or losing side. To me, I just like having the debate.
But I'm
so
playing
that
the
I can-
side.
We can have a debate without having enemies.
Yeah, I'm not expecting.
But I'm
to
on
change,
a side.
I'm not expecting to change anyone's mind or.
I don't expect to change
necessarily-
anything. But I'm gonna win.
It's more about me just trying to understand reality even more through other people.
Fuck
Really.
reality. The reality of the situation is going to be that I'm going to win. That W will forever be in reality.
I understand.
In the cosmos, star, moon, and stars.
Hey, you want to get on battle?
Dust, dirt, gold. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Dust,
I'm trying to find
Dust.
the other
iron, platinum.
thing I listened to.
Dude, my W, there's just going to be a W on the periodic table, and there's going to be my name under it.
You have a very high confidence level in that. All right. Well, I'm gonna end the recording now.